Assalamu alaikum, welcome to this video. We are going to be reacting to Piers Morgan speaking to Peterson. And you love that thumbnail, didn't you?
That's hilarious. Very funny.
Yeah. He's just crying and the middle finger. And so before we get into it, you had some thoughts about him being a critic of postmodernism, but his perspective is still relativistic, right?
Yes, I mean, if I've read most of, if not all of his books, and I've actually, because I was preparing for him, obviously I had two discussions with Peterson. Actually, the discussions I had with Peterson were the most viewed discussions he's ever had with anybody.
Pragmatically, that's good for him.
It's very pragmatic, but I'm saying in terms of, I think I'm number one. If you look at if you go into most popular videos and stuff and podcasts, just like Piers Morgan, I'm one of the top guys there as well. Of course, it's because it's me. It's because it's me, but that's something else. I mean,
maybe smoothly.
Look, I mean, Peterson kind of subscribes to something called American pragmatism, which is an epistemological school of thought. There are three main, if you want, epistemological schools of thought. There's coherentism, there's the correspondence theory of truth, and then there's pragmatism. Really and truly, I mean, you study in your doctorate, you've done philosophy of science. If you know in philosophy of science, the instrumental approach, instrumentalism. I think pragmatism is quite similar to instrumentalism in that sense.
There's nothing intrinsically valuable about a proposition.
Yeah, so for example, like the London Underground map is a good heuristic to understand, but it's not actually to scale representation of what's going on in the underground. Now, the point is that, say, for example, Peterson now, he subscribes to the school of thought. I find it quite incoherent for him, on the one hand, to be a subscriber to this school of thought, but at the same time, he's a large critic of postmodernism when these two things are joined at the hip.
Yeah.
And I don't understand really what his issue with postmodernism is. I think he actually misunderstands what postmodernism is. Because usually when he talks about postmodernism, he couples it with this term
Marxism.
Postmodernism and Marxism are two completely separate ideologies.
Isn't it just a case where he doesn't like the conclusions of the current postmodernists, which happen to be Marxist? So it just happens to be a frozen accident that these are the current things that he criticizes.
I think he acknowledges and understands that, okay, you know, a pure postmodernist is trying to deconstruct meta-narratives. Marxism, though, is a meta-narrative, though.
Yeah.
If you really think what Marxism is it's a meta-narrative.
And are they really modernists from the perspective that they have certain principles which do not move, which do not change? So they see capitalism as evil. They want women in the workforce. They don't want private property and the monopolization of markets. So all of these things, they're not relativistic about them. Yeah. They're pretty categorical about
exactly
them.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, a pragmatist, I mean, don't confuse, I mean, not to you, but to the public, pragmatism as let's say, as a practical tool. Like if I say, oh, this man here is very pragmatic, versus epistemological pragmatism, which is what we're talking about here. Epistemology is really about how you understand the world. So if you're saying that the truth is pragmatic, it's kind of like what you make of it.
Yeah.
To an extent. It's not correspondence theory. Is like, for example, if I were to say this phone is on this table, so this phone is on this table, this corresponds to a truth, an objective truth out there. The pragmatist wouldn't say that is if I say this thing is on this table, it's not like that. So what I'm saying is that
the proposition is in line with the state of affairs. Yeah,
it's not in line with a state of objective affairs that are out there. But then this is exactly the argument. If you think about it, right? This is the argument of the postmodernists, because they're saying that, well, let's talk about transgenderism for a second, right? A transgender, like, he or she or they decide to be whatever they want to be because they don't consider that the state of affairs should be biological or empirical. So I consider American pragmatism, or epistemological pragmatism in the broader sense, to be actually contradictory to, if you like, empiricism and or correspondence theory.
Yeah.
So that's why when he speaks to someone like Richard Dawkins and other people, we're always seeing him speak cross purposes with them.
Yeah. Because one's, if you like, subscribing to the correspondence theory of truth, and one is to the pragmatic. Yeah. He's just looking at everything.
He would actually I don't know why, I mean, this is so ironic because he's made his name really from attacking the transgender people, right?
Yeah.
But his epistemology is so close to theirs. It's so ironic. It's almost like a Freudian kind of psychoanalytic projection. And when he's attacking them so much, is he really attacking himself throughout his books because he knows that's what he is? Or is he actually confused about the state of affairs and how close his epistemology is on record, on paper, with that of his major adversaries?
And we're going to see a clash between correspondence and pragmatic theory of truth in the way that Piers is going to be questioning him.
Come to the end of our parents' lives with regrets, thank God.
Yeah. Obviously, you've just written a whole book about the Bible, about God, about all of this. When I finished it, I couldn't work out whether you actually believe in God, whether you think there is, personally think there is, for example, a heaven. You've obviously had to give this, through the death of your parents, a lot of thought, I would imagine. What is the reality? I mean, do you believe there is do you believe in God? Do you think there is a heaven? Is that where you think they've gone to?
You know, Piers, I would say that I leave the things that are beyond my comprehension outside the realm of my comprehension, and I try to understand what I can understand. I certainly believe that we can produce hell on earth, and we have in many ways. I've certainly had experiences that indicated to me that the reestablishment of the Garden of Eden on earth is a possibility, and that you can live like that. How those things are related to what's eternal is beyond me. I think like it's beyond everyone. And I believe that with sufficient faith that you walk with God through the valley of the shadow of death. I think that's true. I think that if you're courageous and you confront the worst life has to offer, that the spirit of your ancestors walks with you. What that means in the final analysis with regards to the relationship between the finite and the eternal, I don't know.
All right. So
Does he program on that?
I can feel eternity touching the mundane life in the confines of my own life, and I try to make that welcome, and that works. Everything else that I think I've written or spoken about, there's nothing hidden. You know, I'm trying to take people along my own explorations and discovery and sharing what I've come to understand. I can tell you with regards to studying the biblical texts that the more I study them, the more they reveal. That seems inexhaustible, and it's been unbelievably useful. Like writing this book was ridiculously useful. I learned so much. I'm still adjusting to the things that I've learned. And I certainly do believe as well that it's by no means chance that the most functional societies in the world are predicated upon the biblical text. There's a direct causal relationship there.
Did writing
Not
the book,
least because
just on that,
Go ahead.
Did the book give you a greater sense of faith? I mean, did it make you, in a way, more religious as you read more and more and dissected text after text after text?
Yeah, well, I do believe.
he's just being very vague, but at the same time, there is a hidden
No,
element.
I think I know what he is. I mean, if people want to know, he's essentially, look, there's no evidence. Let me put it in this way: there's no evidence to suggest this man believes in God. Okay.
Would you be categorical about that?
There's no evidence to suggest this man believes in God in a similar way as any confessional member of, say, an Abrahamic religion would. There is no evidence of that. I think that there's maybe more evidence to suggest that he is an atheist or he's an agnostic, based on how he's formulated his sentences.
Couldn't you say that he's actually a closet theist who wants to hide his belief in God because he doesn't want to justify it?
To the contrary, I mean, his fans or his supporters, which have been dwindling now after his comments about Gaza and about the Palestine conflict, look how limited his views are compared to how they used to be. Actually, shows you how big the Muslim community was in forming his viewership. That's what it shows. Actually.
And even the moral Christian community that followed him, that was
because his views have gone down so much. Like if you look at before and after the Netanyahu stuff, it's a demarcation. But put that to the side for now.
Mm-hmm.
He's I don't believe that there's any evidence to show that he actually believes in a God in the conventional way, a correspondence theory type way, if you like. make it very clear that a confessional member of the Abrahamic religions would. And there's no evidence to suggest that he believes in the biblical text is actually from such a God, because there's no evidence to suggest that he actually believes in such a God in the first place. Now, I don't know why him and Richard Dawkins actually fall out so much, because in many ways they seem to be more closely related, once again, than he would maybe like to admit.
Well, in many ways, if you look at Dawkins and the New Atheists, their entire argument is based on consequentialism. And what is he talking about? He's talking about the fact that, well, biblical society seem to function better. So it's not really about truth, it's just what functions better. And you can function pretty well on a myth. You know, the Brett Weinstein's ideas on, truth not in the way that he articulates, being God not being literally true, but metaphorically it's true
That's the
from
kind
the
of thing.
perspective that of being
Yeah.
useful.
You remember before we were talking about, I can't remember who gave this example, even in the evolutionary psychology or evolutionary literature that you study, and we're talking about, like, the poison plants, and if you even for survival, you can survive.
This is well known.
Of false belief.
Yeah. This is well known. I mean, surviving Anthony O'Hare's book Beyond Evolution, and there's a lot of people who've actually done work on this. Evolutionary psychology teaches us there's lots of things that we today believe to be morally false as a society, but those things have been biologically. We've been wired, and they've had adaptive benefits, including, by the way, patriarchy, feminism, patriarchy, toxic masculinity, gender roles, these types of things, but also in-group, out-group hostility, racism. These types of things, they actually have a biological origin. On top of that, the idea of God, according to them, is a useful fiction which helps social cohesion. So from all those perspectives, why would anybody disagree? Even Dawkins, why would they actually disagree? The only argument they can come up with is it was useful in the past, it's not useful today.
That's right. I mean, and so I think his position is pretty clear, considering he's been speaking out in vagaries and ambiguities all this time. But essentially, I mean, it would maybe benefit him to come out and say, I'm an agnostic. Just say that. I'm an agnostic. That make you no different from kind of half of the population of London or something, or one of the big cities.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, just on the Dawkins debate, you saw some of the discussion between them. There's some really funny parts of this. There's a part where Richard Dawkins is asking him directly, do you believe in the virgin birth? Right? Very clear question. It's not very difficult to answer. And Peterson goes into his traditional, looking up on the
Becoming
left.
a postmodern.
Yeah. And then Alex O'Connor goes, surely you understand what's being asked of you. That's a really funny clip that's just gone viral on Twitter and stuff, because it's a bit too much now. I think in the past, the vagueness, the way that he spoke, the eloquence with which he spoke, and you were speaking about this in the class earlier, using certain terms to throw people off, that impressed a lot of people. But I think they've moved past that now. They just see, okay, wait a minute. When you asked him, do you believe in God? What did he say?
What do you mean this one? I didn't even ask him what you believe in God, but he said, what do you mean by what? What do you mean by do? What do you mean you? And I mean, do it's not something which like a meaning like that. I think it's an auxiliary. I can't remember the exact grammatical function for it, but it's, what do you mean by do? I mean, you know what I mean? So he done that to run away from the question.
Where do you think this is headed in terms of Peterson now? Is he just going to become another irrelevant relic, which is just going to be shilling for certain governments just to be relevant, rather than a few years ago where it looked like he had a movement, he had a bunch of followers, and he's about to do something?
I think the best move for him is to convert to the religion of Islam. There's no question that, I mean, let's be honest.
Well, at least he'll stop crying
No,
every opportunity.
Wallahi, I actually believe that in terms of his own psychological health, there's no question that him subscribing to a religion like the religion of Islam, in fact, the only religion that he can subscribe to really that can do this for him is the religion of Islam.
This kind of reminds me of what your dad said about him.
Yeah.
Which is,
I mean, if he's such a great psychologist, and why hasn't he saw his own mental health outlets,
exactly,
basically, right? It shows you that
why is he depressed?
No, but it's true. I mean, the thing is, if you review the clip that I had with him, at one point I was like, in the Quran it says, وَمَنْ أَعْرَضَ عَنْ ذِكْرِي فَإِنَّ لَهُ مَعِيشَةً ضَنْكًا وَنَحْشُرُهُ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ أَعْمَى. Which means that whoever goes away from my remembrance, that will give him a depressed life.
Mm-hmm.
And on the flip side, it says, "Ala bi dhikrillahi tatma'innul qulub." That certainly with the remembrance of God do hearts find rest. And he said, I can understand why that is the case. He said, because if you're, and he went like this, because he does that. He goes, because if your focus is multiplicitous, then you become more anxious. But if it's more concentrated, then you become more, then it's less likely that you're going to have that anxiety. The more you have one singular focus, essentially. Right. And by the way, this is backed up by psychological evidence that Muslims, in one university, I think is in Munich, potentially, 2018-19, is the group with the most life satisfaction. It's the only psychological study that I've seen on that being done. And so he knows all this. And if he really wants to sort things out, if he converts to the religion of Islam, he disconnects from certain people, let's be honest, and repents to Allah, does the fasting, does the praying on time. All those things, there's no way you can be like this. I've never seen a Muslim, okay, who does that has this disposition. I've never, no, honestly, wallahi, I mean that as a full out. I've never met a Muslim human being, man, woman, or child, who prays, who believes in Allah, who does the fasting, who does the dhikr, who does the Quran, and who does this and crying and crying every time in his face in this position. He looks like he's gone. He's psychologically. 100% Islam can fix him. He knows it.
Okay. I think that's a good way of ending the session.
Yeah.
So if you are interested in more videos like this, please go to Hijab's channel, watch the discussion if you haven't actually seen it. What else do you want to add before we end?
I had nothing else to add.
You just need to become Muslim.
Yeah, what can we say?
Okay. Jazakallah khair for watching. Assalamu alaikum.